Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Housing and Dining Town Hall. My name is Bethany Grubbs. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the director of the residential experience at Colorado College. Thank you all for joining us today, and we're really excited to speak with you and tell you about some of our plans for the fall and to hear a lot of your questions. I want to welcome both those on Zoom and those watching on Facebook, and to assure you that we have moderators that are watching for the questions on Facebook and funneling them to us via the back channels. This is the last town hall of our series, but I want to assure you that it is certainly not the last time that you will hear from us about our plans for the fall and our plans for our students. This is staff and faculty throughout CC are working really diligently to finalize plans and to be ready for our first large batch of students, the Bridge students, to arrive in just over 3 weeks, and we're very excited to welcome them. I want you to keep an eye on your email on that time, as well as the COVID Facebook page, to try to keep abreast of all new developments, plans, and updates. So this will not be the final information that you hear. On that note, I want to do a little bit of expectation management before we get started. We've received a wealth of questions during each of our town halls, and they're far more than we could really answer during the given time. But we want to assure you that we are hearing all of your questions. While the panelists are speaking and after, I will monitor the Zoom questions, and my member of the RLC team will be monitoring the Facebook questions during the event. We will certainly do our best to get to as many questions as we can, and I'll be acting as your moderator for the panel today. Rest assured, all the questions will be read, and we'll compile any questions that we're unable to answer today so that they can be addressed in future communications or in the FAQ on the COVID page. Certainly keep an eye out there. You're also more than welcome at any time to email any CC staff or faculty member directly. Some of us, myself included, have pretty full inboxes right now, but we are getting to them as quickly as we can. Also, I want to note that if you missed any of the panels, or if you know of somebody unable to attend today's, the recordings and transcripts of all panels are available. This one will be available in a few days on the college's COVID page. I also particularly want to call attention to yesterday's safety and testing panel. A lot of wonderful information was shared there, and it gives us a little bit of a view as to what this year will look like for our students. There will certainly be mask wearing and social distancing, and as much as we can do to keep our communities safe. So if you haven't had a chance to watch that, please do so. With all of that said, I want to go ahead and get us started. Today, our panelists will consist of John Lauer, the Associate Vice President for Student Life, Rochelle Taylor, Student Housing Manager, myself, Director of the Residential Experience. As I said, I'll be acting as moderator, but I will also answer any questions that come my way, and Cody Rogers, our Executive Chef for Bon Appetit. We have some goals for what we want to cover today. We'll be giving a brief overview of the goals that our housing team has worked through to make planning decisions for a safe return to campus. We also want to hear from Cody about what to expect in the dining halls, hear about the safety measures that Bon Appetit is putting in place in the dining facilities, and hear about meal plans and how they might be utilized for the new academic calendar. We will also overview the room assignment and selection process, something that I know that many of you have been itching to hear about. We'll talk about what has already taken place, what is ahead in the coming weeks, and how students should engage in the process. And we understand that students break down into a few different categories there. We have students who already have housing assignments. We have students who have yet to be assigned, students interested in more independent living options, and first-year students. We also want to talk about proposed safety measures to prevent spread and or manage COVID positive cases on campus, something that I know that many are concerned about as well, and options for symptomatic individuals isolating or those who are quarantining after travel. So I'm going to toss it to John Lauer so that he can talk a little bit about our overarching parameters and goals for the residential experience on campus.
Thanks so much, Bethany, and good to be with all of you. And let me just acknowledge how much information you're trying to take in an hour hardly seems adequate to get all the information that I know you and your families are trying to utilize as you're making decisions and trying to understand exactly what life here at Colorado College is going to look like this fall. And I wanted to give just a sense for you, some of the things that were provided to the housing team as they were preparing this year. As you may know, we're just wrapping up with our move-out process, which ended July 6th. We were working very closely this summer with our El Paso County Public Health. We were receiving documents from the state of Colorado and the Department of Higher Education. We kept close watch on best practices that were happening across the country. And we wanted to set up campus life as consistent as possible so that students, as they come and go from their residences, weren't trying to figure out, well, what am I supposed to do in housing and what am I supposed to do on the rest of the campus? And we really wanted to focus on maintaining community engagement and understanding that these are going to be the homes for our students. But we know it's not going to look like any other year previous to this. And we really wanted to keep that in mind as we thought about how to set things up. It does look like the slide got mixed together here, but it does speak right at the bottom of the slide here to our billing methodology, which I'll cover just a second. Bethany, why don't you advance the slide? So we were using our design capacity of our residence halls. Those of you that are returning families and students, you know that in previous years, we've sometimes had to use triple rooms, doubling up what would have been a double room into a triple. We've at times had to use study spaces. And given the need to reduce the density in our student population communities, we're only using the design capacity of our residences, so we won't have any temporary spaces. We did need then to secure over 300 additional bed spaces to accommodate our students who could no longer study abroad, a large first-year class, and spaces that we're going to need for isolation and quarantine needs. As we looked for that housing, we know many have inquired, why not just let everyone off campus, let juniors off campus? Those of you that are familiar with our area know that there are not 300 beds adjacent to our campus. And we also were concerned about the density of our adjoining neighborhoods and the safety of our students living in those neighborhoods. So we needed to look for additional options that might provide private bedroom, private bathroom access. And as much as possible, we were understanding that we were going to need to support and encourage micro-communities, looking at how we could help students formulate friendship groups and stay connected with about 4 to 10 students who they may not have to then follow as much virus prevention control, I guess is what you might say, so that you could operate almost like we are in our families and in our homes. We also needed to maintain equity of access to these options. And we knew that just saying, well, you're on your own would put some at an advantage and some at a disadvantage in finding housing. So those were some of the things that we looked at primarily as we went to secure additional housing, which Rochelle Taylor will talk more about those options. And again, we did want to keep our semester billing methodology, but each semester, rather than the 4 blocks, will include 5 blocks to accommodate the 10-block academic year. That fall semester will include blocks 1 through 4, plus the J block, and spring semester will include blocks 5 through 8, plus the A block. For a student just coming for the spring, if they wanted to come for block 5, then they could switch out the summer block A for that J block if they weren't utilizing it. So that 10 blocks of housing would be available, and we would be looking at that as we do in any traditional year. 3 blocks would be considered full-time. So those the other 2 blocks, if the college cancels more than 2 blocks and does not allow you to live on campus, that's when we would begin considering a rebate. Bethany, you can advance the slide. So now I'd like to turn it over to Cody Rogers and have him begin to talk a little bit about our dining experience.
Appreciate it, John. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Cody Rogers, the executive chef with Bon Appetit here at Colorado College. First thing I want to kind of tackle is obviously safety. I think that's first and foremost on everybody's mind. So Bon Appetit operates in 33 different states, and we're in multiple universities, corporate centers, and cultural institutions. So we have some practice for safety. We're actually a company steeped in a culture of safety and sanitation. We have even been serving a small group of students here at the college over the summer. So we've actually had some practice ourselves here. One of the first things we're going to do, or many things we're doing in all of our cafes, is providing social distancing markers, wayfinding signage, and anything like that to help with confusion, make everybody feel comfortable and safe as possible. Along with that, we're also going to have ambassadors on the floor to help direct people through the cafes, help maintain social distancing, and answer any of the dietary questions that kind of come up as you're looking at the meal program and everything that's offered there on the menus. We also have a dedicated COVID team moving through the cafes to help clean any high touch and high traffic areas. And they'll be going through every 30 minutes. And this is to ensure everything is safe as possible. We are moving from a self-service in our Rassel Cafe to a full-service program where we will be handing out the food that's selected in biodegradable containers, along with the condiments and cutlery that will all be disposable. That way we can prevent any contamination from any reusable containers that way. The best way for us to ensure doing this is actually putting our staff through several hours of COVID-19 specific training. They'll be required to wear masks at all times, as well as gloves, social distance wherever possible in the kitchen, and we will go through wellness checks with all of our staff just before the beginning of any of their shifts. And this will include any purveyors that are coming into our building as well, so that we mitigate and catch anything that may be walking into our doors. All of this will include temperature checks, recording it, so on and so forth. If any employee shows symptoms, we have a detailed decision tree with step-by-step procedures of how to handle that and make sure that we handle everything properly and sanitize everything properly afterwards. Again, safety is one of the most important things to us here, not just food safety, but personal safety. So we want to make sure that that's first and foremost what we're tackling. All the cashiers will also have plexiglass and things like that. We are not taking any cash. Everything will be done through card. That way we can eliminate as much as possible from any cross-contamination as things are handed around. A little bit about what food we're going to be offering. We are not going to take away anything that we're offering. We are still very much committed to our goals to have vibrant, fresh, made from scratch and locally sourced food, if not more so than ever. We have a very close partnership with several of our local farms and ranches like Cornipost and Aquaponics, and we'll rely on them more than ever to do what we do. So we are not changing anything. We're still going to have some amazing food offerings. We're still going to be very much plant forward with lots of vegan and vegetarian options, and we will still have a fully dedicated area for made without gluten containing ingredients. If there are any other dietary restrictions or concerns, you can always reach out to us at coloradocollege.cafebonappetit.com or through the disability office, and we can answer any questions and make time for meetings. That way everybody feels safe about it. On top of all that, we always need soul food. So we'll always have our fried chicken and cheeseburgers and tacos and things like that. It's just as important to have those things as it is to have healthy options as well. Some of the few of the other things we're going to be adding is a picnic box, or think of a quick service food truck that we're going to put under Olin Annex that will be operating Monday through Friday. That'll have awesome things: tacos, large salads, pizzas from time to time. We'll also be bolstering our grab and go program as well to make sure that there's more offerings out there, including more ready to heat meals, so that students can heat meals at home and things like that and avoid as much social interaction if they so desire. And then for students with kitchenettes and the ability to cook in their spaces, we'll actually even have a small market or pantry with some essentials like rices, oils, beans, a small selection of produce and things like that. That way they can cook at home as well. And as usual, there's always the catering offers, thinking of you packages, birthday cakes, all sorts of stuff that we can do through the catering department as well, which is always a nice little treat to throw in there. And as far as meal plans go, we can always add money to the meal plans. Our suggestion is for everybody to eat the first block as they would normally. And then the second block is to kind of review and look at their balance. To see their balance, every time they swipe their card, it will come up on the POS screen at any of our cafes. So they'll be able to see real time what their balance actually is. We can always add anytime through the online portal, and it is in real time, so it adds right away. And yeah, any money will carry over from the fall into the spring semester as well. So anything not used will then be transferred over to the spring. We will be open for block breaks and things like that, as well as the fall break. We want to make sure everybody's fed, happy, content with everything that's going on. And yeah, I believe that is everything. And we can pass it on to Rochelle, I believe is the next.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Cody. So this portion of the presentation, I hope to provide you a summary of how our team is approaching our charge to administer housing assignments in the next few weeks, and with an intent to let you know about what the processes will be and the timeline for when we expect these things to happen. So in all, there's about 5 or 4 major selection processes that we'll be working through. I'll talk to you today about supplemental housing. Some students with single semester assignments, that's students whose fall away programs were canceled or they chose to postpone. We'll talk a lot about online room selection that a lot of students have had questions about, and then finalizing first year and transfer student assignments. And then just a little bit about the safety measures. So late last week, I sent an email to all of the returning students that are expected to enroll for classes this fall. This included students who have already participated in some housing assignment processes, cottages, apartments, and theme selection. And that represents about 580 confirmed housing assignments that we already have in place. The message also introduced the supplemental housing offerings, which are designed to help de-densify our campus and create these smaller nuclear groups of students in smaller group living arrangements. So let's talk about supplemental housing first and what those options are. Bethany, if you can move that forward. So beginning July 13th, we will start reaching out to students who have reached out to us, and there's still time for students to continue to do that, who have had an interest in living in some of these supplemental housing options. So the lodges and West Edge are apartment living communities. They're 4 and 5 bedroom apartments and townhomes with single bedrooms with private baths and walk-in closets, full-size beds. There's a full-size washer and dryer in the unit. There will be residential experience programming. There's free on-site parking. Students will also have access to free public transportation, and each apartment will be allotted a free campus parking permit. These units are about 6 to 7 miles north of campus, just off of Nevada Avenue. The third supplemental housing option, which we'll also be working to assign students to, is Bijou West. So these are suite style, double and single room configurations. Most of those configurations are private bathrooms. They're queen size beds. There are no kitchens in these units, but they all have a microwave and mini fridge. On-site laundry is available there as well. Small community, again, of CC students, residential experience programming, free on-site parking, free public transportation, only 2 miles south of campus, bikeable and walkable using the West Side pedestrian bridge. So we think that these options are ideal for students who want to be in Colorado Springs, but can accomplish the greater portion of their coursework virtually. For those student groups who at least one apartment occupant has access to a vehicle, and groups who have a confirmed spring semester housing assignment, but not a fall semester assignment. Again, that's students who had to cancel their fall away programs. We plan to do that all next week. Students who have given interest and who continue to have interest will be reaching out to you. It's not an application process, but we'll be asking you to complete a supplemental housing agreement, and then going from there to work directly with you to find the unit of your choice and confirm those assignments. Also during that week, we'll be securing housing again for those students who are fall away. If you want to advance that, thank you, Bethany. So that's about 120 students were impacted by canceled fall away programs. So of that student group, those students who have neither a fall nor a spring housing assignment, they can opt into a supplemental housing option or plan to participate in online room selection. Of that group of students who secured a spring only assignment in anticipation of being away in the fall, you can expect to hear directly from the housing staff, and we'll work directly with you to identify a fall-only housing option or an optional year-long plan, but we'll talk directly with you about that. So online room selection, lots of questions about that. We've had to, if you want to go to the next slide, please, Bethany. We have had to delay it a couple of times, but we have a final calendar for you here. It will start on Tuesday, July 21st. We will release the selection dates and time slots. Students will receive an auto email giving them that information. I do want to make clear that if a student has already been assigned for housing for fall and spring semester, they do not get a selection date and time slot. So these time slots and dates will go to students who have yet to make a decision and have decided to choose a housing option on campus. The first students who get to make those decisions are our fourth year students, expected grads in spring 21. That will happen on Wednesday afternoon, July 22nd. For our other two classes who will select through online selection, our third year students will select on the afternoons of Thursday and Friday, July 23rd and July 24th. And then the following week, Monday and Tuesday, is when the second year students will participate in online selection. At that point, returning student housing assignments are just about complete. Always we end up working with some students who perhaps have selected not to participate, or for whatever reason their plans may change and they may opt in later. We're always available to make room for those students and to help them identify a spot too. One thing I also wanted to include about online room selection is that we accomplished that using the Banner student housing application. Many of our students are familiar with that, but some of our second year students, or many of our second year students, with the exception of completing a housing agreement and filling out their preferences, have never went through that process. We will post something to our website that will walk you through what you'll need to do. But basically, you'll log on to the Banner student housing application. You'll be able to select from your preferred buildings, see which rooms are available in those buildings, and select the housing of your choice. For those students who plan to be in a double with a friend, they should also make sure that their preferences are up to date and that their roommate has made a match in the system if they need to select a double room. So finally, or I shouldn't say finally, but next is our first year in transfer assignments that during the week beginning July 27th, we'll actually be finalizing. So we've made steady progress on this, making these assignments since the forums closed on July 1st. We're currently about 40% complete with that. We continue to go through that and review and finalize assignments for our students that will be new to campus, making sure that we've done our best to make compatible roommate choices and that preferences match quite well. We will finally post those assignments to the Banner Student Housing application on July 31st. At that time, students can actually log on to Banner and see their housing assignment, these first year and transfer students. And at that point, by July 31st, most of the first year and transfer student assignments will be complete as well. And then the next slide, I think we're just talking a little bit about the safety measures and how we have approached working towards that. Again, by lowering on-campus housing density, we're working towards having more single room options on campus for students who want to live in a campus residential hall rather than one of the supplemental options that we have available. We have isolation housing reserved for students who may show symptoms, and quarantine housing as well for students who may need to quarantine. All of these housing units are fully equipped with bedding, linens, TVs, etc. So if a student starts showing symptoms in their on-campus housing or supplemental housing option and need to be isolated right away, they can just bring themselves, change of clothes to these units and have everything that they need to get through the next days. We'll do routine delivery of meals, meds, and their essentials, and on-call staffing will be available at request when students need something from us. And I think that's the last of my slide, Bethany. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. So now we're going to enter into the question and answers portion of the town hall. So I've been keeping an eye on the chat. Put any questions that you have in there. Again, I'm going to reiterate that, keep in mind that we might not be able to answer all questions. Some I'm answering personally in the chat feature. I also see folks raising their hands, and I do encourage you to utilize the chat feature. That is how we will be sort of engaging with questions. So the hand raising isn't a function that we're utilizing today. If your question isn't housing or dining related, please refer to the CC COVID FAQ page, or you can email that office or department directly. And for any housing and dining questions that we can't answer today, we'll make efforts to include in future communications. So like I said, this isn't the last time that you will hear from us, and feel free to contact us with your further questions or questions specific to you or your students' circumstances. I'm going to give some campus contacts here. And so you can always email housing@coloradocollege.edu, bonappetit@coloradocollege.edu, or the COVID-19 email. And so I will stop my screen share momentarily here. I'll put this page back up at the end as well so that you can write down those email addresses if your questions haven't been answered. But I will ask all of the panelists to come back on so that we can start to toss some questions their way. And while those folks are getting ready for that, and while I'm stopping my screen share, I'll answer a couple of questions that I saw that came in. One very frequent question being asked is, will the halls be open over fall break? Given the fact that, there is the travel restriction for if students opt to travel over fall break or over Thanksgiving break, that they should plan to take Block 4 remotely. And so I do want to assure we have always allowed for students with any kind of need to stay over that fall break. And so closer to the time, you will probably see a form come out so that we can know who is intending to stay with us. But that will be approved. So that will not be a problem. Housing will be provided over that fall break. Another thing is many are wondering about the opening of the dates or the opening of the registration process for move-in, because we are going to be doing a phased move-in for both our first-year students and our returning students. And we're going to spread that over a couple of days so that we can decrease some of the congestion that we see during typical move-in periods. Usually they're quite bustling, quite busy, lots of shoulder rubbing, and lots of people crowding our residence hall lobbies. And so we're spreading that out a little bit, and we will have students select a date and time period to move in. My promise is that we will give advance notice of that registration opening so that you will have at least 24 hours ahead of time when you will know, like, hey, I'm going to set my alarm. I'm going to set a little calendar announcement so that I can make sure to get online and reserve my spot. But that will all open after everybody has their housing assignments so that we can be monitoring that on the back end and make sure that we don't have the entire Montgomery house, for example, moving in on the same day. We want to spread that out, and so we'll need to make sure that students know their housing assignments first. Okay, so I think what I will do, I've been monitoring all those questions as I see, keep tossing them at me. Pardon the fact that I'll be looking back and forth between two screens. I'm going to give a couple of questions to Cody first for Bon Appetit. One of the questions that came in the chat was about the other eateries, the Preserve and Colorado Coffee, and if there are plans for those to be open in the coming year.
Yeah, those are great questions. So both will absolutely be open. Colorado Coffee is actually currently open and will be open for all the early arrivals in August, and will remain open through the year. The Preserve will be open for Block 1 as well, while modified obviously for social distancing because it is a very tight space. That will be the largest change. And then hours will more or less stay the same. We'll obviously adapt as the needs of the students arise. So whether it's extended or just remains as is, we'll do all of that. But yeah, everything as of now will be open.
Excellent. And on that note about the hours, somebody else asked if there would be extended hours for the Rastel Dining Hall.
So as of right now, we're not extending anything, but we are certainly not just going to have a hard cutoff for the time. So we will adapt if we do need to extend the hours. We absolutely will. But if there's a line at the door and we need to make sure everybody gets in and fed, we will stay open as long as it takes to make sure every student gets the meal that they need.
Excellent. And then one more question for you before I toss to somebody else. Somebody asked if non-meal plan students would have access to those grab-and-go meals for cash payment.
Yeah, absolutely. While we're not taking physical cash, we are set up to take credit card and debit card, I believe, at all outlets. So absolutely everything is available for any and all students.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Cody. I'll give you a little break and we'll see if any other questions come in later. I saw the question come in. Well, this might be quite a simple one. Somebody asked if students who choose to learn remotely at home would still be charged for housing and dining. And so I'm sure John can speak to that.
Yeah, if you do not have a intent to be on campus for the semester, you wouldn't reserve a housing assignment and you would not be charged for a housing assignment. If you're considering, I want a room on campus available to me when I want to be on campus, then if you do reserve a room, you will be charged for that room. So as I mentioned, a semester is going to be essentially 5 blocks. And so if you intended to be on campus in the fall for only 2 blocks voluntarily, you would still need to reserve that room for the entire fall semester. If the college does not allow you to live on campus for more than 2 blocks in a 5-block semester, that's when we would begin to consider a potential rebate because you were not allowed to be on campus in a particular semester for 3 blocks. A consideration, though, to keep in mind is that, for instance, if you do choose to leave for Thanksgiving break, the fall break, and then aren't allowed to return because you left willingly, and you knew that if you did leave, you wouldn't be allowed on campus that fourth block, that would be considered a voluntary decision versus a campus's forced decision. For those of you who are not able to come to campus because of the campus decision until block 2, that is one block that you are not being allowed to live on campus. That would be a part of that consideration. And if we were to not allow students on campus for more than another block who were not allowed to come to campus till second block, that's when we would begin to consider a potential rebate.
Absolutely. And John, while you are answering questions, another question that has come up frequently is what will happen if the college needs to close again mid-semester?
Yeah, and that will, have to be a contextual answer. We are looking at the possibility of allowing students that are in the supplemental housing up north, which is off campus and not dependent on the meal plan, to potentially be allowed to stay, even in an instance when the campus is closed. We should have that decision next week in time for those of you that are considering that option. It will also probably depend on the conditions on the campus as to whether all housing types might be closed or whether we may be in a position to allow some students to stay. But it is going to be based on the health and safety parameters that we're looking at in terms of why we are considering closing the campus, the conditions that we might be able to maintain on campus. And it is possible, just as it happened in the spring, that we might be in a position where we do have to close the campus and send folks home, with the exception of those who are just not able to return home.
Okay, a question for you, Rochelle. One person asks, for students who were supposed to be away in the fall but shifted their program away to the spring, will they get, if that spring study abroad program doesn't occur, will they get one housing assignment for the semester, or will they be permitted to stay in one place for the full year?
Oh, I was able to do it. Yeah, so we'll definitely look at these plans. We're actually concentrating on fall housing at this time. But I think definitely with that group of students who some have spring assignments and some were planning on being here in fall, some of them are in apartments with a friend group already. I think there will be room for us to kind of make some changes that all the students agree upon so that the entire year of housing is available to them.
Excellent. And then if a room assignment, somebody is clarifying, if a room assignment was already provided, does that mean that a student needs to take no further action on housing?
Absolutely. If they have a confirmed fall and spring semester assignment and they plan on being here both semesters, then they're good to go.
Excellent. And then there was another question about how many spaces, and we might not have a precise number on this, but how many spaces are being set aside for quarantine and isolation should they be needed?
45.
Let me see here. You answered that question so quickly, I have to queue up the next one.
Yeah, I saw a question. I thought it might be, I was kind of going through the question and answers and seeing if I could type in answers. And I saw one that probably required more typing that I could do really quickly. But there's a question for there seems to be a question for students who do have a fall and spring semester assignment. Some of those students, or at least some, have inquired that if they decide not to come in the fall, will their room still be available for them in the spring? The only way that we could reserve a spring housing assignment for them is if they actually reserve it for the fall as well. So our practice has always been for students who are not here during the fall, that housing hand creates assignments for them when they're expected to return to campus in the spring. So if you have an assignment, let's say in Bemis Hall, or better get back to one of those theme housings, like let's say in the Language House for fall and spring, and you decide that you don't want to come in the fall, that becomes an open room for the entire academic year that we can make available for students who are planning on coming in the fall. When you do decide to come in the spring, we'll be working directly with you to find another space, likely not in that space if it's already been assigned, but another space that would be acceptable for you.
Great. I've also seen a couple of questions come in via the chat about social gathering and what life will look like for students on campus. And I think that for that, again, I will refer back to the safety and testing panel from yesterday, where Dr. Horton gave a lot of great guidance as to what the requirements may be on campus and how we can help to protect our fellow community members. And keeping in mind that our community, as she described, includes not just fellow students and fellow residents of on-campus living, but also our faculty, our staff, and our greater community around the college. So there will be, rest assured, it will look different this coming year. And we really need our students and our entire community to understand that and to be able to make smart choices based on helping to keep their community safe. So there were some questions in the chat about, will I need to wear a mask when I go to the restroom in my residence hall? We will be putting out a lot more guidance about that soon and really making things a lot more clear. But I would expect certainly that masks will need to be worn much of the time. There also is a health screening app that will be utilized, as was described yesterday in the safety and testing town hall. And then many people asked about social gatherings. So parties, as students may know them on a college campus, are not going to be a thing this year. So we want to make sure that students are adhering to the policies of gatherings of no more than 10, and that students are really being careful and cautious. We have a guest policy that is proposed that would have no more than one guest in a student's room. And a guest in that definition would include any other student, right? Anybody who's not assigned to that particular residence hall room. So what we really need to make sure that we don't see so that we're keeping everybody safe is 10, 15 students piling into a room, or an apartment hosting a party, or a house off campus hosting a party. So we've typically had a party registration form that allows our students to really keep an open dialogue with us about the social gatherings that they want to host. And there will be very different expectations for that in place. So something to be aware of for the coming year. Let me see a couple of other questions. Let's see. Going back to Cody, some questions about, will students be permitted to eat in the dining areas, or will everything have to be grab and go? And then also, will there be a physical setup, a change for furniture and et cetera in the dining halls if students will be allowed to or permitted to eat on site?
Yeah, again, a very important question. For phase one, we will not be allowing seating in our dining halls because we cannot properly social distance and make it a safe environment to actually eat and move around. And that's within the walls of the dining hall. And that is just for phase one. So as we slowly move out of this and we get healthier and safety in the community, we'll add seating and things like that. So obviously the furniture and everything in there will be moved around. And will be replaced as needed as we go through the phases, of course, based off of CDC guidelines and our local health regulations. That's kind of where we stick to and follow. So when they tell us we can start having people seating, we absolutely will. And yeah, I think that kind of covers it.
Another question that's coming in is asking from seniors who have already elected or have a housing assignment on campus, perhaps in a cottage or maybe in the apartments, if they would still be allowed to or permitted to change their housing assignment and perhaps move on campus to make more room or space for on-campus housing. And so I'll put that to Rochelle.
Yeah.
So these are students who they already have a housing assignment, and they're wanting to move off campus. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? for senior students? Well, I would say that we do expect these students to arrive on campus. We appreciate the offer to make room, but I think we've put a lot of things in place to make sure that that's available. And I also think that we have some safety and protocol measures in place so that students can feel comfortable living here on campus. I don't have a lot of information about student breaking contracts. I think it would be problematic for us at this point for those assignment processes that we have already completed, for instance, to then try and, let's say, for instance, are 2 people leaving from this apartment community, or is the entire group leaving, and then trying to move students into those spaces? It would be pretty problematic and add a lot more to what we're trying to complete right now. So it would be good for us if they, continue to stay on campus in what they've committed to, and we could concentrate on students who actually need housing at this time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, thank you. There's a few questions about how shared spaces, in particularly the large halls, will function. And so I can speak to that a bit in that I anticipate that for the coming year, we will have a reservation system for lounges, for study lounges to be used, as well as for kitchens, because we want students to be able to utilize those spaces, but we also want to decrease the likelihood that there would be congestion in those spaces or multiple people using them at the same time. And so that is something that I anticipate, and I think that covers most of the questions that came in about lounges and kitchens. So there would be a sign-up process, and maybe something similar for laundry rooms as well. There were a couple of questions, and I don't know whether this would be Rochelle or John, but a couple of people asking about, will they be charged for housing and dining for Block 1 if they are an upperclassman student not permitted to return until Block 2?
Yeah, thanks, Bethany. Yes, as I was explaining, essentially the semester will be considered as 5 blocks, and so those students will all have 4 blocks of housing paid for, 2 through J block, and their meal plan money will roll over, and that meal plan money will roll into Block A of the summer as well. So as we consider that 10 block flexible academic calendar, the housing will run through those 10 block period. And so again, unless the college restricts a student from living in on-campus housing for more than 2 blocks, there would not be a rebate in those scenarios. And I'm also seeing some questions about what does reduced density mean, capacity questions. People have heard about 50% capacity limitations. Within the residential communities, as I mentioned, we'll be functioning at design capacity. And we acknowledge that in previous years, we have actually operated with some excess capacity in terms of temporary triples or study rooms that may have been converted to student rooms. We will not have any of those. As Rochelle mentioned, we are also working hard to ensure that any of our most vulnerable students who are working with our Accessibility Resource Office and may have an accommodation to a single, we can accommodate those. But we are not restricted by the 50% capacity in the residences. So they will not be at 50% capacity. They will be at design capacity.
Yeah. One question about if a student is unsure of their ability to get here in time for Block 1 or Block 2, should they still engage in the housing assignments process? And my guess is that this might be from an international student who is wondering about visa restrictions and travel restrictions. Rochelle, would you be able to speak to that?
Sure. Again, thinking of how we have to be prepared for the beginning of fall semester. If the student wants to participate, they would be billed for the entire semester when that billing goes out. I imagine Amy may do that this year sometime in early August. People are billed for their housing prior to the fall semester beginning. If they don't want to be billed for fall semester, they would need to wait, let us know when they get ready to arrive in third block, and we would be looking for an empty room that we could move them into.
Great. There's some questions in the chat about, or in the question and answer about utilizing outdoor spaces and where students might be encouraged to take their grab and go meals. And so I can speak to that a bit. I think that we have the benefit of some really wonderful weather in Colorado Springs. And so many of our students do take their meals and take their grab and go out onto the lawn and sit there. And I think that that's something that students absolutely should continue to utilize. And then in terms of other spaces, of course, taking their grab and going back to their residence, to their room, or perhaps to even grab a reservation for one of those study lounges and have their meal there. I would say that is by design what we're looking to know that when students are eating, obviously you cannot be wearing that mask and can't be utilizing a lot of those safety measures. And so yes, eating back in their hall or outside in the open air would certainly be a wonderful option. I don't know if Cody wants to speak to that anymore.
Yeah, I think that's really the best way to do it, at least during this first phase.
Sure. Let's see. There are a lot of questions in regards to access to campus. And so locations like the gym, will students have access to the fitness center? I can tell you that we've been in a lot of conversations, and we know that for student mental health and for wellness, that the fitness center is really a key aspect for students to be able to get to the gym and keep with their regular routines for self-care and wellness. And so we do anticipate that the fitness center will be available. They are piloting some things this summer in order to be able to open in the safest way possible. Rochelle?
I would just speak to that also. We are, though, expecting that capacity limits will be reduced in those spaces. And so I think that's an important consideration that particularly for our returning students who are used to just going over to the library and being able to get in, there should be an understanding that that's unlikely, particularly as we get started at the beginning of the fall, that there may be a need to reserve space. Those spaces will be limited in terms of the number of people. And that was another reason behind the thinking of some of the supplemental options, which also have some on-site amenities that we would expect will have some limitations on your access to those. But that may be another consideration is if you're thinking, well, I'm used to being over at the library every single night for 6 or 7 hours, that may not be something that you're able to do. And then you might value a private room in a setting with some of your closer friends in the supplemental housing that may work for you. There was also some questions about whether our second-year students could have access to that supplemental housing. It was released first to our juniors and seniors, but Rochelle's working with her team. And if that is what you believe is to be the best scenario for you, you should reach out to our housing team and communicate that. And if you feel like that is a good option, that's available to you. Our first-year students, though, are all going to be housed on campus together in our 3 large residence halls, although we have dedicated LUMAS completely to first-year students as part of some of our efforts to de-densify the campus.
Excellent. Another question is about triple rooms, and will students be permitted to live in triple rooms if that is something that they desire and select?
Absolutely. We have made some triple room assignments already through other processes. And anyone who has submitted that, or first year students who have submitted that choice for their preferences, we will also assign them to triple rooms by request.
Excellent.
And that is just to reiterate part of our design capacity. We do have rooms that were built and designed to house 3 students, and those rooms continue to be available at that design capacity. We are only, though, assigning triple rooms to those who are requesting them.
Another question that I can answer too is a little bit of concern in the Q&A section about how students will make friends, and particularly I imagine first year students, or how students will maintain and cultivate those friendships that they have existing for our upper division students, particularly around the limitations on gatherings and the limitations on guests in the residence hall rooms. And I assure you, we understand that, right? We understand the fears that may come with that, or the anxieties that may come with that. And residential experience staff are going to be still utilizing programming, utilizing all of our adaptability and innovation to make sure that there are still plenty of opportunities for students to engage in the college community and to engage with friendships and make new friendships. And we believe that there are many things that we can do to encourage and help students to do that, to not only maintain and keep their friendships that they've made already, but to really cultivate new ones and to feel a member of the CC community. So those things, those tactics like being able to utilize outdoor spaces and reserving the lounge spaces, and of course utilizing platforms like Zoom and other electronic means, and really, as Dr. Horton mentioned yesterday, encouraging students to sort of find their small network of students, their small cohort that they would really be able to trust and engage with most often, so that they could be keeping that circle a little smaller. So I hope that speaks to that. We are coming to the end of our time, and I do, of course, want to acknowledge that we were not able to answer all of the questions that were put into the chat, but again, to reiterate the fact that we see those and we acknowledge them, and there will be many other communications coming out. So we will share those. I saw a lot of questions about cleaning and schedules for cleaning, and we will certainly pass those along to the correct individuals so that they can address those needs in their own communications. Really, I want to thank you for the time and reiterate that you can email housing@coloradocollege.edu, bonappetit@coloradocollege.edu, or the COVID-19 email. As I mentioned before, many of us have really heavy inboxes, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. And so give us a little bit of grace with the amount of time for a response, but email any of your specific questions to us, and we will be more than happy to respond to your specific circumstances and your specific questions. We absolutely want to hear from you, and we want to be able to put your mind at ease in any way that we can about our plans for the fall. Big takeaways and things that I want to mention before we end are that first years should respond to the first year residency survey by Sunday evening, so that we know that what your choice is for how you would like to learn for the coming year. And then returning students just refer to that adjusted timeline for housing selection. And also, because this is our final town hall, I'll just put out a note that if you missed any of the town halls, recordings and transcripts are, or for this one, will soon be available on the CC COVID-19 page. So a huge thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to everybody for listening, and I hope you have a good and safe day. Thank you so much.